We've often heard stories about tunnels used for human trafficking and drug trafficking, and about the various types of trafficking operations run by drug cartels and coyotes. Behind it is a major business wrought with a disregard for American law and for human life. To learn more about these operations, we contacted the San Diego Border Patrol, which granted us access to one of the trafficking tunnels captured from the cartels. And we also arranged interviews with agents who specialize in each of the major forms of trafficking on land, at sea, and through underground tunnels leading into hidden locations in the United States. What stood out to me most about the tunnels was that these are often not dug by specialists. It appears the cartels have standard designs for creating them, but the manual labor is done by people often working as slaves, who may be killed afterwards to protect the tunnel's location from being revealed. The tunnels are crude yet effective, with simple rail systems and tubing for oxygen. While the main use of the tunnels is typically going to be for trafficking drugs, they can also be used as more secure channels to traffic anything into the United States that's deemed valuable enough. To learn more about this, we spoke with Border Patrol agent Lance Lenoir with the San Diego Sector's tunnel team. Hey, welcome back everyone. You can see we're here at the U.S.-Mexico border near San Ysidro in San Diego. Recently today, end of the day right now, I got to go into one of these smuggling tunnels where they bring people, human trafficking, drug trafficking, you name it. I got to speak with some of the agents there as well. A couple of them escorted me there. We went into the tunnels, got to check out the different carts they have, rail systems underground, everything. Stick around for that. I'll be showing you what it's like in there. Go into it now. All right, folks, so you can see here we have this cart. There's a whole rail system going up. We have a whole rail system going up. Oxygen systems. I'll take this a bit deeper, so go further. Oh, look, they have the whole lighting system in here too, huh?
Let me know if you see anybody up there.
Yeah, I'll let you know. Keep you updated.
Switch. You run that line down for me.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So we're here with Lance Lenoir at the U.S.-Mexico border. And sir, can you tell us about this tunnel here? So we have here one of the human trafficking tunnels used by the smugglers here. What are we looking at with this?
This is the real deal. Now, actually, we obviously went back in there and facilitated the entry point in here, but this is a drug tunnel that we discovered back in 2013. So we remediated that. Smugglers went back in, paralleled our remediation in there, and dug another tunnel in there. So we intercepted that one in there, caught them in the act essentially in there. Tunnel was relatively stable in there, says with good opportunity. We'll just leave it as a test and training facility.
Interesting. And so with this, did they circumvent a sewer system, or how did this actually work?
No. There's no sewer system in here. There's no sewer systems really between the ports of entry out here per se. No, this is just your threat area is going to be in a building somewhere, some type of infrastructure on the south side, and you got infrastructure on the north side. There's your high tunnel threat area. So the only reason they're tunneling in this area is because they can get from point A to point B in secret.
I see.
That's simple.
Is this primarily drug trafficking, human trafficking, all of the above?
Well, this one actually checked two boxes in there. So most sophisticated drug tunnels are for narcotics, almost 99.99% of them. This one actually came into play while we were in the process of remediating the second instance of this tunnel in there. Human smugglers actually went in and smuggled 30 individuals through the incomplete tunnel that we had already found and came up on the other side in there. Fortunately, those were apprehended.
Now, in terms of how these things work, I mean, how many would you say are along this border in terms of what you find?
Well, sophisticated, we're up to about 31.
So in terms of tunnels like this, about how many have you found? About how many could we say are along the border in this region?
Well, we are up to, I believe, 71 in San Diego sector alone. We're up to 212 nationwide. And that's kind of a mixture. So it's a cross-border tunnel. It could be one like this, which is hand dug, sophisticated in length and accoutrements. And you also have storm drain, which is what you referenced earlier there. They can get into a storm drain that actually has a nexus to the border and facilitates smuggling in that manner. So we're up to quite a few in there. San Diego seems to be kind of the hot spot for the longer, sophisticated tunnels, and that's simply by virtue of the amount of commercial real estate you see north and south.
In terms of the places where this would come up at, would this be a building, a house? What would it be typically?
More often than not, it's in a warehouse. As you see, countless, I believe there's about 15 million square feet of real estate, commercial real estate in Otay Mesa alone. So that's typically, but it's not exclusive to that either. We've seen them in open lots, come up in dumpsters. Their creativity knows no bounds.
Now, when it comes to the guys who build these things, are these like specialist tunnel builders for the cartels and so on, or what are these guys?
No, it's mostly your low-level knucklehead.
Oh, really?
It is.
So it's not super sophisticated.
No, they're not
then, huh?
sophisticated really. Now the planning, it takes there's some coordination goes in, I wouldn't say engineering expertise in there, but getting from a spot in Mexico to like a bathroom or a closet in the United States takes some pretty good planning. So they're not rank amateurs in the planning phase, but as far as the actual construction goes, as you will see sooner than later, there's nothing special about this, and there is no engineering aspect to these things at all.
Oh, really? I mean, in terms of like oxygen systems, I know that normally with tunnels like
Give me an example of their oxygen system in there. It's usually a leaf blower or a floor dryer. And you'll see once in this one in particular is a bounce house blower.
Oh, really?
Now, give the devil his due on this one in there, because there's a method to their madness, right? Those actually rather inexpensive and crude systems in there work fantastically.
Do they really?
They absolutely do.
Really?
They get the job done. All you need is oxygen in there.
Now, in terms of the cartels, because we assume at least most things like this we would assume are done by cartels. These big cartels, small cartels, and if it's done by amateurs, why would they invest so much into something so basic, I guess?
Let me clarify a little bit in there. The actual element that's actually constructing these tunnels is the lowest tier, right? They're all part of the same machine. Okay? Yes, cartels. I don't think we're not divulging any big secret when we say that. Of course they're behind this in there. They have a product that's illicit in the United States that they want to get into the United States in secret. Tunnels is one of those conduits in which they do that.
Now, in terms of the human trafficking element, we of course hear about people just trying to enter the U.S. legitimately. One of the things some of our own reporters at Epoch Times have found is that with kids, for example, sometimes the kids themselves are being used by traffickers basically as ways to get into the U.S. because, they come with children, it's easier for them to get asylum status and so on, and apparently they hand them back. I don't know how this whole thing works. Have you seen instances of that, where kids are being used by the traffickers for operations like this?
I can't point to any specific example in there, but I've heard stories of that. As far as using these types of conduit for that, I can't really provide any specificity on that. But yeah, we all know it happens.
Yeah.
Either subterranean or above ground in there. It's just a sad product of the system that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis here.
Well, I think that's another thing too, is I know part of what Border Patrol does, your goal with all of this is to make sure people go to the normal border crossing, apply for asylum through normal processes, and discourage them from trying to go through things like this. I understand there's a business behind this though. Who are the guys doing the businesses when it comes to trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking? Like, what is the business behind this, would you say?
The big business behind it in there, of course, it's going to be your cartels. It's going to be your low-level outfits in there that are interspersed. It's territorial on the south side, just as it is anywhere else. It's the profit margin. I can only speak to the smuggling of contraband per se. That's kind of what we deal with in there. The profit margins that for one successful transit of drugs south to north is huge. So by any market analysis in there, it's obviously they're going to be trying to do that. And they do it because they've been successful in the past. Let me put a finer point on that with regards to tunnels in particular in there. So these are inherently unstable structures, okay? It's usually just a matter of time before they become unstable, right? So our expertise, our kind of forte in this thing, and we've been doing this for about 10 years, so we've developed some best practices on what to look for, because this is not a job occupation that is, widespread. It's pretty much confined to a small group here in San Diego and one maybe in Tucson. That's it. There's nowhere else that they do this specific line of work. So some of the dangers, inherent physical dangers that they deal with in there, it's a crudely built tunnel in there that meets no engineering spec whatsoever. It's not built as a wine cellar that we built to code, like certain buildings and homes and stuff like that in there. These things are subject to collapse if they're built wrong. So we've seen instances of that in other tunnels as well, where they have collapsed. Usually I've seen that because I made a mistake and I shouldn't have been in there in the first place. And the biggest one that kills everybody in these confined spaces is the noxious gases, right? The atmospheric conditions. So it's either A, the lack of oxygen, prolonged deprivation of oxygen in there, crawling through these things in there for an hours on end, they're stuck waiting, and all this other stuff in there obviously can have mortal effects. But it's also the hydrogen sulfide gas. Anything that's organic that's been decayed in there over time. Methane, we've seen that in there, and carbon monoxide as well. We've seen certain places where we've been in Mexico where they've actually had gasoline combustion engines operating inside a confined space.
Oh, really?
I don't have to Google that to know that that's a no-no. And that's usually what kills people in any confined spaces, more often than not, hands down, is carbon monoxide poisoning.
Is it frequent that you find people who've been killed in these things?
No, we've seen it in certain storm drains in there where they've actually got caught when it rained all of a sudden and got a flash flood type effect. We've actually had to pull some poor lost souls out of those structures. It's atypical. I wouldn't say it's common. It used to be about once a year way back in the day, but we haven't seen it in probably the last 4 or 5 years. That's fortunate. Now, we have done several rescues where we pulled individuals out that could not get out.
Oh, really?
They actually crawled through such a small space they couldn't get backwards. So,
and I guess too, if they crawl through and they find it's been collapsed at one point, they can't turn back.
Right.
Is that the case?
Right.
I see.
It's a nightmare scenario for those poor souls.
Now, in terms of your work, they said you're the tunnel guy. How did that happen?
We just kind of fell into it. Well, the problem was there.
Yeah.
It kind of festered a little bit, and then it kind of exploded. So we had to go back and but essentially invent the rules in which how we're going to combat this stuff. So first of all, we had little to no idea what was actually taking place in our area. What is the definition of our battlefield, so to speak? And how do we go in these things safely? Do we need to go in these things safely? How do we effectively get rid of them? So we developed a 3-tier response to that in there, which is primarily investigations, public outreach. That's everything you see here. We go building to building to building in there, inform and get information. And the third one, and the biggest one, which is also the most lacking, is technology, right? So giving us the known from the unknown without having to rely upon human sources to actually do that. So that's one of the things we're actively working, and we're kind of, cutting edge when it comes to that type of technology, because we're not talking about finding an oil or water or natural gas reserve, which is huge, right? We're trying to find something about 36 inches in diameter. Could be 100 feet down. So it's very difficult to find those things in there. And so we're working on it.
Well, you're trying to counter whatever crazy thing they're coming up with at any moment, and I assume trying to predict where they would be doing their operations. What's it like trying to think like they think and then outthink them?
Impossible. Just when I think I've seen it all, doing this for 10 years, I've been doing it for longer than probably some of the guys digging these tunnels in there. They still come out with a way to surprise me. Every single tunnel is different. Yeah. There's a wrinkle in there that I've never possibly anticipated. I'll give you a very clear example. The .79 tunnel that we discovered last year, around January-ish in there, that thing was 4,006 feet long, okay? Almost twice as long as our next closest tunnel in there. So it was amazingly long. We didn't think that they had the audacity, or at least their audacity was limited to something a little bit closer than almost a mile, right? Not only that, it was 75 feet below the surface. which puts it below the water table. Normally that kind of kills the tunnel when it gets flooded out. Well, that didn't stop them. They actually put in a very intricate pumping system to get that water out to still get drugs through. And keep in mind, what comes north can also go south too, right? So it's a two-way conduit. So
and we assume that's guns going south. That's what they talk
sure,
about.
guns, cash, anything else in there that they can't openly declare going south into Mexico.
Jeez. Oh, thank you. So I'm here in the tunnel, as you can see, and pretty dark in here. We're just getting ready to crawl in. So looking up here, you can see we crawled down a ladder to get into it. And also just turning around here, you can see that this is the entrance. Partly sealed off on the border side. Heading through now. We got a couple officers here with us.
Agents.
Crawling through. Nice double check. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So yeah, you gotta. That's almost puts a nice little punctuation on it. Trying to get around somebody.
I tell you about it. Yeah.
Make sure you say agents too, by the way.
Agents, that your official title. I like it.
Well, it just makes you sound more credible.
I like it. Yeah, it sounds cooler. So, what are we looking at with these pipes here?
So everything you see here.
Sorry to blind you with this.
No, that's fine. Everything you see here is as is. So the whole idea was to leave it as the real deal. So we wanted to test off something and train in the actual environment. So what better than use one that they've already dug for us? So here's your crude ventilation system in there. It's very typical what we see in most of all these. Wired up. Power is right down here at the bottom. Obviously you see the rail system in there. This is just basic angle iron in there. And what I'm sitting on in here, they just fabricated this out of, their whatever they came up with. Yeah. Fairly common. You see something that's in these carts. They
speeds up transportation.
Well, yeah, it gets the spoils out, which is the big heavy lift when it comes to digging a tunnel. So you can see how they use basic hand tools, stuff you get at Home Depot. This hammer drill, it's got a spike in there. You can see the striations right in there. Usually a guy comes in, digs the crew hole, and a guy follows behind him and shapes it.
Oh, so, interesting.
Yeah,
so they'll have the initial guy tunneling and then the one doing the kind of touching up.
Yeah, so making it wide enough for this, because this is what gets the dirt out much quicker. And when it's done, pushes the product north.
I see.
So it's a double function on this stuff. And there makes kind of going back and forth in these things a little bit easier for us too.
I see.
I will not lie.
So this tunnel, you use it for training purposes mainly?
Yeah, we train in this thing in there. So one of the few groups that actually do this type of work with some level of consistency. So this is one of them. So we'll train whoever needs to be trained in these types of environments. Pointing out, geological features, shape, basic geology, what to look for, how to operate a gas mine, all those technical stuff's in there. So.
Yeah, very interesting. In terms of doing run-ins, I mean, you do search and rescue operations as well. You mentioned some of the times you had to pull people out of these.
We are prepared to do that, yes. We are all trained rescue specialists, so yes.
Oh, geez. Have you ever had run-ins with cartel types in these tunnels? Or
not personally as of yet. We usually go to great pains to have these things cleared out by both sides, Mexico and the United States, so we've been really fortunate in that. So,
I see. So there'll be communication with the Mexican authorities as well when you do clear one out then.
Correct.
I see. And so in other words, you have to locate then both sides of the tunnel.
It helps, yes, but sometimes we're only, the last several as a matter of fact, in there we haven't had a north side exit, so we actually had to go into Mexico and actually map it from that point.
Interesting. Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes when you're dealing with movies and the way they paint these tunnels, it's four guys standing shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
You ever seen one like that before? Do those exist?
No, not here in San Diego. Probably not in Tucson either. I have seen some in other countries as well.
Oh, really?
That are more like that. Those tunnels are purpose built for moving the most amount of people through.
Now, I have heard stories from security guys talking about cooperation with, for example, Hamas organizations to teach them tunnel building. Have you seen instances of terror organizations or narco-terror organizations? No involvement with them?
No, this is not rocket science in there. I mean, we all did it as kids, for crying out loud. It's not that difficult. It's basically trying to keep them on a certain point. It just comes down to distance and azimuth. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And I would say a healthy dose of persistence and a whole lot of audacity, because it takes a while to build these things. But the payoff is huge, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And now, in terms of these guys, I mean, you call them like, these are low-level knuckleheads, essentially. These are criminal organizations doing these things, not sophisticated. Some people, of course, portray them as like, oh, they're bringing, people here to find, hope and whatever else. Are these guys just like hardened criminals you're dealing with? What are the types you deal with when you have found the ones doing these tunnels?
Well, the people building the tunnels in there, yes, they are criminals. Of course they are. They're in it. They work for an illicit organization in there whose sole purpose in there is to import poison into our country. Yes, that makes them a whole level of scum in anybody's estimation. As far as the human smugglers, I put them in the same category. Yes, the people constructing these types of things to circumvent our national security and our laws. Yes, criminal is too nice a word to probably use.
Have you personally encountered any of these folks with arrests, or have you made arrests of the tunnel builders?
No, they're quite elusive.
I see. I can imagine. I assume too, you're probably coming after the fact, so
yeah,
they're probably in there cleaning up the walls or something for you guys.
It's on my bucket list, trust me. But it's quite elusive in there. It takes time to actually find these things in there, even longer to actually get into them sometimes. So that much time elapsing in there to catch somebody in the act is slim and none. But I will say, I know one example, the Galvez Tunnel, which was discovered back in 2009, a little further east of us. So we had significant intel and information that the tunnel was where it was located in the south side. We thought we had a location on the north side, but we couldn't pin it down. So we worked with our partners in Mexico. They hit the location in Mexico, and basically caught him in the act. As in the process of them clearing the tunnel out, they arrested 13 individuals still actively working in the tunnel.
Oh, wow.
So that was a pretty good score for on that particular tunnel, but we haven't been able to replicate that yet.
Now, with these individuals, are you talking armed cartel guys, just worker guys?
Sure.
What were they like?
Well, in every organization, you have a bottom rung, okay? The guys digging a tunnel in there, hauling dirt, it's back-breaking work. It's very menial. It's very hard. It's a young man's game, I'll say that as well. It's back-breaking work. There's no intelligence really required to sack up a bag of dirt and move it on a cart south. I'm sure the organizations in there. Yes, I think we're not that naive. We know who the organizations are probably working for, and they're probably not the nicest people.
Yeah. Well, just thinking about it too now, I would assume if they have the basic structure planned out for how these things work, it wouldn't be that hard just hiring some basic laborers essentially to carry out plans.
Prisoners.
Yeah, and they come across, of course, a lot of these guys do construction work. You see them standing outside Home Depot. I could see them picking up some of those guys and say, hey, how'd you like to go dig some dirt for us for a while? Would you say that's the typical laborer for this type of thing?
We've had, I think it's pretty well documented in there, some of their low-level laborers, as you put it. They get them from prisons. There's not a shortage of low-skilled workers in Mexico, just like there's probably not in the United States. So we have several entrances in Mexico where we've seen that they've actually been locked in to either a basement or the facility itself, and they were just locked in there until they've completed the tunnel.
So these are basically slaves, essentially.
Yeah, it's
a hard word, but not allowed to leave.
And they're trying to keep it so secret in there, they don't want anybody out. What happens to these folks after these things are constructed is anybody's guess, but it's fair to say it's probably not a rosy outcome.
Really? Jeez. I mean, I could see it, especially if they want to keep people from talking about it.
Very Machiavellian.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah, it does make sense.
How many tunnel rats use the word Machiavellian?
None. I've only known one other tunnel rat in my life. He was a Vietnam guy.
I'm kidding, of course.
yeah.
I'm just messing with you.
I knew a Vietnam tunnel rat actually. It was a pretty interesting character.
Well, that's where we kind of took the name, not that we even compare ourselves to that heroic individuals who did that in there, but it's more of an homage or a tribute to those people who actually, those are the real tunnel rats in there. We're just trying to basically give them some props.
Your patch, is that what it's a homage towards?
Yes, it is taken from those guys in there,
there.
and those are the inspiration, those guys right there.
Tunnel rat SOC, is that what it says?
SDC tunnel rats.
SDC, San Diego County?
San Diego sector.
San Diego sector, I like it.
That is a tribute to those guys that came before us in there and did the real work.
Good stuff. So how far does this thing go back? If we can get a shot back here.
Yeah, you can get in front of me here in a bit. This one goes a couple hundred feet.
Really, where does this one come up at? Can we say?
On the other side of the fence.
Generally, just building or something.
Yeah. So for everybody listening to, especially our adversaries in there, it goes north of the secondary fence. So
oh wow,
there you go.
Yeah, and for our viewers as well,
that's a joke for anybody listening.
For our viewers as well, there's two fences. There's the main fence on the Mexico side and the secondary fence between it. Can you tell us why you guys have two fences? Some people might not understand, why two fences would be needed.
Well, it's an extra. You saw all the infrastructure to the north, right? So we have commercial real estate literally butting up against the actual border. All right. So once they actually breach that first layer of defense in there, they disappear. It's very hard to apprehend and find out who actually came north. So it's just defense in depth. Very basic concept, has been used for thousands of years. So the whole idea is to limit the probability of successful illegal crossing of the United States. So when you have two fences in there, time increases. It takes a little bit longer to get through in there. More time we need to effect a proper response.
I see. Now, let me see if I can get a shot with us in here as well.
And anybody who says fences don't work in there, just hang out a few minutes in there, you'll see it in full effect. So of course it works.
Well, that's a big thing too. I mean, I a few years back actually, I did some videos. I did a video and article with Epoch Times, interviewing San Diego Sector Border Patrol, and I understand before you guys had the fence here, it was a free-for-all.
Right.
I know you had the soccer field, they called it, where they'd play soccer just illegally cross. You had bonsai runs.
Oh, yeah.
They'd have hundreds of people lined up along the border.
Thousands.
That was thousands.
Oh, yeah.
Run at once, and I understand Border Patrol. I mean, they could not do anything and not because they're outnumbered, but because of their own safety. You're outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Not much you can do. I mean, in terms of how things turned around with the wall in San Diego sector, can you talk about that? I know the wall here is really the model for what's being done across the whole country right now, the whole border at least.
Most of it, yeah. Well, they're trying to.
So how would you say the effect was of the border wall when it was built?
Not much. As
Really?
far as tunnels, I can't see much. I know there's another party line for this one as well, and it's right. I just don't know if I can get it right in there. This is what I will say definitively. So, tunnels of this variety and deeper ones, a little more extravagant ones, which is not much more extravagant, but storm drain. The principle is the same. They existed long before there was even a wall here. Okay. As little as 20 years ago, there was just a single cable basically delineating Mexico from the United States. That's all that separated us. They were still tunneling back then, okay? Tunnels serve a certain purpose in that it's able to move a large amount of product north in secret in relatively short order. If you try to do that more conventional means, whether it's through mules and backpack or through the ports of entry, in a truckload or something like that, and it takes constant efforts and multiple visits to do that, all decreasing your probability for getting that much through, right? So tunnels, even maritime stuff is the same manner, right? You can get a lot of it north in relative short order, and the payoff is astronomical. So it makes sense from that very crude way of looking at things.
And I assume they just keep every channel they can open. They exploit every channel
Sure.
they can, right?
Sure. It's a business just like everything else.
Hmm.
Just happens to be illegal and very dangerous.
Yeah, well, and then very dangerous individuals. Too.
Yes.
Right. Right.
Well, you got to throw some spice into it, right? we're not dealing with the Boy Scouts down here.
Yeah, it's true. Now, I'm curious if on a more personal note, if you don't mind asking. I mean, not everyone says in their kids, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be a tunnel rat.
I don't know why not. I've had a blast doing this in there.
Yeah,
It's every tunnel we get in there is a brand new adventure that very few people get to experience. We've been doing this long enough. We're obviously not claustrophobic. That's a pretty important requirement not to be.
Yeah.
But it's seeing something new and different every single time in there. And I mean, it's in anybody's occupation in there. You don't get to do that too often. So we love what we do. We love being the cutting edge. We love learning more and developing more, and in a very niche, vocation. So yeah, it's exciting, and it's. I don't want to say I wish we had more, but we're also trying to figure out this big puzzle in there, and how do we find something that's so tricky to find, as much as 100 feet below the surface. How do we do that? That's never really been done with any great levels of success, regardless of what people say. But it's just trying to crack that code, and we're getting close to it. And I want to be there. Hopefully I'll be around long enough to see that.
Interesting. And you said you've been on this probably longer than half the guys building these things. How have you seen them change over time? And in terms of, you say you're coming close to cracking the code, what do you mean by that?
Well, these tunnels all share similar characteristics, right? Mm-hmm. They all find within a certain depth, average. The shape, the material, the location is somewhat predictable. So we know essentially where our tunnel thread area is. That's the easy part, right? Mm-hmm. As far as them doing anything different in there, I would say the tunnels that we were back in 2009, Galvez, that was 6 feet tall, 4 feet wide.
Wow.
So what has changed is they've actually started to miniaturize these things in there. They've realized that digging a tunnel 6 feet by 4 takes time. It's twice as long to build. It's twice as much cost. To get all that stuff through. And why do you need that?
So all they need is a little cart like this.
It's all about pushing the dope north, right? So it's not about creature comforts. It's all about what they're pushing north, and that's why we're seeing it. Like the dimensions you see here is average now. So anywhere between 42 and 36 inches diameter in there. That's what we see. So I haven't stood in a tunnel in 10 years.
Wow, really?
This one's hands and knees for the most part. The last two we were in there, hands and knees as well.
Now, again with the human trafficking element too. Well, I think 2 points. One, the human trafficking element. You said this is primarily for drug trafficking. There are some instances of human trafficking. Why do they choose not to use tunnels primarily for that?
Well, they're just all potential sources of information. It makes sense.
Oh, interesting. In other words, people leave and like, hey, go to this place.
And they all talk eventually.
That's interesting. Yeah. Now, in terms of personal safety, I mean, you go explore these tunnels. I assume the two main things you have to deal with are potential oxygen issues or gas issues. The other one possibly booby traps. Is this a reality?
Oh yeah. I don't think they'll probably do that. That would probably have a very catastrophic response if they were that, short-sighted to do something that stupid.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't put it past them to be that stupid. So we tread accordingly.
Yeah. And in terms of the air quality, how do you guys make sure you don't fall victim to gas leaks or whatever else?
Well, we go into the gas meters every time in there. So we've vented this thing out in there. We have two points, right? So we have a circuit of air. But those gas meters are basically the most important thing we actually carry along. It tells us how much oxygen we have, any HS, any CO, anything that could kill us down in there. And if we register any of that, most often than not, it's usually not enough oxygen. So then we have to actually force air in. So that's where the true science and improvisation really come in. They don't really build systems in there to ventilate, half-mile long underground tunnels. If they do, we haven't found them yet. As you came in earlier, you stepped over a bounce house blower. So they'll use a series of those, and a little bit further north in there, there's a floor dryer as well.
Oh,
so they're just basically pushing air as far as they possibly could. You see these right in here? Most often than not, we'll actually repurpose these and basically just reverse engineer the whole setup with our own systems.
What is this again?
It's just regular, just PVC in there, 3-inch PVC that they use. It's very typical in these tunnels because they have to push air a long way.
This is the oxygen tunnel then.
Right, yeah, and it's usually just air they pull from the surface in there and just blow it in there. It's not air conditioning. They don't air condition these things, unfortunately. But that's usually the most critical aspect of it. There's trying to get air in there and push that much air in there to the end of the tunnel. And it doesn't help when the tunnel is either A, incomplete, doesn't have an exit, or it's closed. So we can't establish that circuit of air. It takes time. So we have to, sometimes we're on the clock. So it takes some pretty significant ingenuity in there to develop those systems in there, redneck engineering as we call it, to get us in back and forth safely. And the whole time we're in here, we're always assessing where we're at. So typically I'll go in as more or less as a recon element, and I'm looking at the dirt. I'm seeing if it's coming off, sloughing. I'm looking at the ground. Is there any significant chucks? What type of dirt are we looking at? Is it shaped accordingly? All the 100 other little bitty things in there that I almost take for granted now, but I'm almost instinctively absorbing all that in as we move along, so the guys behind me can actually take precise measurements in there and get this thing mapped accurately.
Yeah.
That's just the key to remediating.
Nice. I guess just last question. In terms of your work, in terms of what the nation is dealing with drug trafficking like this, if you were to tell people anything, you wanted to take one thing home from this, what would it be?
We enjoy what we do. I think it has a solid purpose. I think we're making the communities better when we kill one of these. I sincerely believe that. It sounds a little corny to some people in there, but everyone we kill, and we can't do it fast enough. These things are bringing untold amounts of poison north. Anybody has children, teenage children especially in there, know exactly what I'm talking about. If we can put a small dent in that, it gives us some solace in there, but I will say I'm a bit selfish. I do take a lot of personal satisfaction because I really love doing this.
A few things stood out from the interview with Lance Noir. These tunnels, although their main purpose is for drug trafficking, they can be used for anything to bring any kind of illicit material into the United States if the pay is high enough for the traffickers. The people running these operations are not benign humanitarians. Their purpose is to make money and to exploit people and violate laws. The people they use to build these tunnels, the laborers, are treated like slaves and may face death once a job is done in order to protect the location of these tunnels. Now, folks, if you'd like to see more stories like this on Crossroads, please let us know in the comments. As always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free.